We need to talk about Tesla. This flow from last week is insane. I'm just showing you Friday alone here. So this doesn't even count Thursday, Wednesday, etc. Look at all the premium. $1 million print, $3.2 million print, $1.1 million print. And you can see throughout the day, 4.8 million, 1.3 million, just a ton of premium across the board, mainly in call orders. These were super aggressive, all above the ask, all right around the money. And with a short-term expiration, all things considered, that's why they're all highlighted in gold here. And it's just continuous throughout the day, super unusual calls and throughout the week overall. And we can see it evident based on the chart. This is a very bullish breakout, technically speaking. And the reason, is actually a couple of reasons. First of all, we have a very nice rounding bottom pattern right here. You can see has a very nice like cup-like pattern to it, which eventually broke to the upside past this 299.73 resistance, just about 300. And then the other bullish factor is based on volume profile. This is an indicator that you can use, pretty basic one, but this just tracks the amount of shares traded at a given price. So what we have here is a lowercase d-shaped profile. Kind of looks like a lowercase d. If I were to draw it out here, as you can see, it looks pretty similar, all things considered. And whenever you have a lowercase d-shaped profile, it acts as accumulation inside of this portion of it. So for example, here, all of this volume in between both of these, where you see it jut out, is a form of accumulation once it breaks above that level. And in this case here, we broke decisively above 260 and then above 300, which means all of this is acting as a springboard for future price discovery to the upside. So this is a very bullish setup, technically speaking. And then again, the whales definitely noticed that as well based on how aggressive they were for more upside with all of these calls that we saw. So what does that mean for this week? Well, personally, I want to trade this. And the best trade opportunity that I found this weekend is if this were to, and I got to get rid of these red lines that I'm drawing here, make it a bit more obvious. But what I'm looking for is about 300 or a retest around there. Now, obviously, this doesn't have to happen, but if it were to happen where we see a retest around this area here, around that 300 level, it doesn't have to be exact. Could add like 1/2 prior in case it decides to form a higher low, a bit higher up. But if it goes around this 5-point or so range, I'm interested in adding because this would form a higher low and it'd be a retest of the breakout level. So this 299.73 level is a previous resistance that started a while ago, the one that I showed you before, that daily rejection, and then it rejected once it retested again soon after, which was only Thursday of last week, and we finally broke out above it on Friday. So a retest around this level will be a breakout retest whenever I see those, especially from a critical line, such as a trend line or horizontal line in this case. Those have a higher probability of bouncing. So in this case here, if we were to see something like a drop maybe into Wednesday or so, we have a higher probability in this range over here to see a bounce and then a continuation even higher off of that. So what I'm interested in doing is adding January calls around this here. Again, we don't know if it's going to touch this 299.73 to the exact level. Could be before. And what I like to do to make sure that I at least have some type of exposure is add about 1/2 prior. So like 1/2 at 305 and then another half over here around 300, and my stop would be an hourly close below that level. And as long as it doesn't have an hourly close below that level, we can see it continue a lot higher, like I just showed you from before. If it doesn't decide to go down here because it closed all the way up at 321, which is certainly higher than where I would like to see it this week, then I just let it be, because there's no reason for me to chase something like this unless I'm trading it intraday and I see a level that I want to trade based off of. There's no reason for me to initiate a swing if it's all the way up here and the best risk reward, the best entry based on a supporter level is down here around 305, 300. So in trading, you're never going to be able to get every single setup that you want. You have to let some of them go. And if this decided to just continue on its merry way from here, then that's one of those setups that I'll have to let go. Just find another setup to trade. So that's my plan for this week. Really like this one, technical wise and flow wise. And speaking of letting it go in case it just decides to continue higher and looking for a different setup, I'm still interested in QQQ over here. I spoke about this acting as a consolidation before a breakout, and we have that spring effect. All of this consolidation from over here acts as a spring once you have that upside move. It's a coiling spring when it's inside consolidative fashion, and then it breaks out and you see that energy release. And we've certainly seen that energy release so far, went all the way up from 500 to 515 just last week. So still interested in this one, continuing to buy the dips. I personally believe anything above 500 is in buy the dip territory. I like all of this up here Obviously, you want to look for a specific level to add. You just don't want to add anywhere, like a random level for that matter. But in this case here, I like all of this up here. If I can find a valid level to add, like a valid supportive level, I'm willing to add it off of that just because of how bullish it is above this 500 level. I've been talking about this 500 level for multiple videos now in a row. And I even mentioned I had this in there prior. As long as we got above this level, we were going to see all-time high plus after. That's certainly what we have seen so far. So looking for some type of a pullback, ideally, to add longs off of. Otherwise, just going to continue to the rally to the upside. And similar to what I shared in Tesla, if it just wants to continue, it can continue without me. I'm fine with that. I'm not going to FOMO in because when you FOMO, you do not have good risk reward in the setup. You are more likely to fail. So that's just over the long term. And it's better to stay flat on a position than take a loss due to FOMO. So that's my mindset towards trade setups like this. But as for this week, looking for something like a drop to around 509, 508. I really want it to retest this gap over here because what we've seen is two large gap ups in a row. We had the gap up after the election and then the gap up the following day. I'd like to see this gap get tested and then not filled. So a fill would be around 505, 506 or so. I'd like to see it go back down to around this level here, and this would act as a gap bait setup. And basically what those are is when you see two gap ups back to back and then it comes down to retest the recent gap up and it kind of baits bears into thinking that it's going to go for the gap fill, and then it finds support around that gap area and then continues up higher from there. So I'd like to see something around this range. Again, like I said, similar to Tesla, it doesn't have to go down here. It can just continue to melt to the upside. But I'm always looking for the best risk reward setups, highest probability of a bounce. And this area down here is that highest probability of a bounce, in my opinion, in this range. Also, significant gap open prices tend to act as a nice support when they're retested initially. And what I mean by that is this level right here. Whenever you have a substantial gap up or gap down, whatever level it opens on, the body of the candle for the next day, that tends to act as a nice support when it is retested later on. And the inverse would be the case for a gap down for that resistance if it's retested as well. So I like these types of setups, especially in an impulsive like move, because this is certainly impulsive so far. I like to see it retest, form a higher low, and then off of that higher low, it can support it for a lot higher price discovery. Personally, I believe this can go all the way up to 523. So watching for something like that, would like to add January calls on this as well, very similar to Tesla. So I definitely like this one if it can adhere to my entry requirements. If not, then that's all good. Always can go to some other setup as well. Regardless, these are the two main setups that I'm watching for this week, and I'll see you guys next time.